Now I would like to start the discussion. Let me first invite Professor Swaran Singh from India. Professor Swaran Singh is Professor for Diplomacy and Disarmament at Center for International Politics, Organization and Disarmament, the School of International Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University, India. He is President of Association of Asia Scholars, General Secretary of Indian Association of Asian and Pacific Studies, Guest Professor at Research Institute of Indian Ocean Economics, Yunnan University of Finance and Economics in China, and Advisory Board member of Atlanta-based Communities Without Borders, INC, United States. He has been visiting professor and member of editorial board of several reputed universities and journals around the world. Professor Singh has co-edited Transforming South Asia, Imperatives for Action in 2013, India and the GCC countries, Iran and Iraq, Emerging Security Perspectives in 2013, On China by India from Civilization to State, Cambria 2012, and several others. Professor Singh, over to you, and you have around 8 to 10 minutes.
Thank you, Dr. Pramod Jaiswal, for that generous introduction. I hope you won't deduct my minutes of speaking for that introduction. It's a delight to be on a panel with my friends, Sangha, Shahab, and of course Jerome, who just spoke to us. Let me be quickly on the subject very directly. We are discussing navigating US-China rivalry, and we are doing so from South Asian perspectives. The first thing I want to bring to the table is that for us here, this is three rivalries that we are talking of. That is the lens we use to understand US-China rivalry, because in addition to the US-China rivalry, there is also China-India and India-Pakistan rivalry. In that sense, this becomes a kind of a triangular exercise when we look at US-China rivalry, how that is influencing South Asia, and how South Asian rivalries are again contributing to the US-China rivalry. So you could look at the larger global structural drivers, or you could look at the very local drivers like India's reorganization of its province of Jammu and Kashmir, or recent events in Afghanistan. So local as well as global elements are involved here. First thing I want to underline that really is significant to understand why these rivalries are reshaping and recalibrating is that United States for a long time had sought to balance relationship, keeping strongly engaged with Pakistan, with China, also with India. But fundamentally, the unprecedented rise of China has perhaps changed the game for all of us here, and in that sense is recalibrating not just the US-China rivalries, but also China-Pakistan axis or nexus, whatever you wish to call it, or the growing India-US proximity. And I think we need also to remember that we are talking here of the nuclear triangle of three states, China, India, and Pakistan. So let me begin by first talking about the global structural element of it, which is technology and trade war, as we say, constantly going on, expanding into Indo-Pacific region geopolitics, where US and China are largely engaged in that exercise of multiple kinds of contestations, engagements, depending on how you wish to have a look at that. And what is the connection that this larger rivalry has on the ground? Very quickly, if you look at India and China relationship, as recent as September last year, there was accusation after the Galwan big incident that again some firing took place on a line of actual control between China and India. And simultaneously, we were seeing the US fleet in Bay of Bengal holding joint naval exercises with Indian Navy, and that led to insinuations of all kinds. And I want to cite some examples because the Millennium Project colleagues are with us from Washington, DC, for example. Let us look at how these events got interpreted by well-known scholars in DC. Tanvi Madan, for example, she's currently with Hudson Institute. She called this correlationship of tensions on the border and then joint exercises in Bay of Bengal as signaling to China particularly that United States would stand with India. And some of us are reminded of 1971 liberation of Bangladesh time as well, when again US fleet had shown up in Bay of Bengal. So there's a connotation of some historical events here. Likewise, you saw Jeff Smith of Heritage Foundation. He called this as a reflection of complementarity, or what he calls complementary forces emerging in the proximity of United States and India. And he calls it drifting or pushing India from its traditional effort at soft balancing China to more overt and obvious material, visible balancing of China, in that sense supported by United States in that sense. We also see that United States and India have had now these 2+2 dialogues. And in November, they signed some agreement called BECA, Basic BECA agreement, basically Communications and Engagement Agreement, which is third of the foundational agreements. And that was interpreted by someone we all know, Michael Kugelman at the Woodrow Wilson Center. He called it a game changer. And he defined how non-line movement of India was really finally drifting under the name of strategic autonomy, where it was shifting from Moscow, which was a kind of proximity India built in dealing with Pakistan threat in 1971, to now proximity or leaning on Washington DC with the larger threat of China looming on it. So scholars sitting in Washington DC themselves are saying that there is a direct correlation of United States rivalry with China redefining local rivalries within South Asia, whether it is China-India or India-Pakistan. Now, to go back to what is the official version of it. 2018 United States Strategic Framework on Indo-Pacific itself says very directly, and I'm quoting it, a strong India in cooperation with like-minded countries would be a counterbalance to China. So there is no mincing of words here when the United States wants to outline its strategy to deal with China and how it sees India playing a certain role in that. And now if you look at the brass tacks on the ground, after signing this BECA agreement last year, November, there is a whole advanced set of technological cooperation which is being opened up. And now, for example, there is a talk of sharing of satellite data, topographic data, drones, advanced aviation, advanced navigation on US supplied aircrafts, etc. And this is all meant to help India to achieve more accurate targeting and monitoring of what is happening on the other side of line of actual control vis-a-vis PLA armed forces. And to some extent, that support was visible during last year when the tensions were built. And there was reports about some kind of United States help to India in providing that information data for the movement of PLA forces in that region. Now, how is that impacting Indian preparedness to deal with China? Two things. One, very obviously in last 20 years, 20 billion plus of defense contracts signed, enormous amount of contracts with European countries and Israel, for example, Japan is negotiating. So a whole new effort at modernizing Indian armed forces through procurements, primarily through procurements from United States and its friends and allies, so to say, in that sense. And in that backdrop, even Indian organization of armed forces is being reorganized, and we are talking of creating 5 theater commands for Indian armed forces. And that would again be sort of very clearly focused on actual operations, which are going to be sort of forward frontline operation driven kind of exercise. Now, obviously, there is a repercussion to the other connect or nexus or axis that we call of China-Pakistan. The moment India and United States have signed 3 foundational agreements, and last year again, I think in November, China-Pakistan also signed an MOU. And I remember when I was young in 1975 September as well, there was an agreement signed by Bhutto, which was called the Agreement for Science and Technology Cooperation, but was understood as cooperation in sensitive technologies, shall we say, if you don't want to call it nuclear and missile technologies. Likewise, an MOU again signed, but media is talking about this MOU of November 2020 between China and Pakistan being focused on intelligence and technology sharing to provide Pakistan same advantage of monitoring and better targeting Indian military positions or military movements on other side of line of control between India and Pakistan in this case. China is increasingly driven in engaging Pakistan now because of its China-Pakistan economic corridor. I would even put my neck out by saying the most significant reason for Pakistan being engaged by China today is this enormous Belt and Road Initiative component, which is most significant for China. And then that is the route China wants to become a global power, and Pakistan, being a close friend, is seen as a flagship project, which is what it wants to showcase. So the enormous focus has been on this infrastructure and the security of this infrastructure, which has kept them together all the time. And the MOU that I just mentioned, in that backdrop, therefore, Senator Anwar ul Haq Kakkad, for example, from Pakistan Senate himself said that this MOU is signed for ensuring to counter onslaughts of India backed by United States. So there is again a sense of US-China rivalry pushing even India-Pakistan rivalry and pushing India-China rivalry is what I'm saying. So what the theme says, navigating through this US-China rivalry. That is my last 1 minute to speak on. Fundamentally, I want to flag here the episode of 15th August of takeover of Kabul by Taliban. That is an example to all of us in South Asia, whether it is Chinese or Pakistanis or Indians, that more than other countries, United States is driven very, very staunchly by its own national interests. And it can upstick business and make sure it goes away. You have seen the same thing happening in Iraq earlier, and you saw that happening in Afghanistan now. So sometimes this over-reliance on the United States perhaps is a thing that must be taken with a pinch of salt, because United States might suddenly see that its interests are moving in a very different direction. I remember when India and Pakistan had conducted nuclear tests in 1998, Bill Clinton went to Beijing and signed a joint statement saying that China and United States will jointly manage security of South Asia. Now, this was something very, very sort of touchy for countries of South Asia, obviously. So, United States, what happened in Afghanistan is a case study which shows that over-reliance on United States, or in that sense, over-reliance on China as well, perhaps may not be a very good thing for South Asian countries to do. They have to be really conscious of ensuring that their own equation, their own ability to protect their interests continues to be located in their own hands, in their own capabilities. Of course, for modernization, they would have to depend on some of these advanced countries. So procurements of advanced technology is fine. But United States coming to rescue any of the situations in South Asia, Afghanistan is a good example of what can happen. And Afghanistan today, thanks to United States so repetitiously, sort of leaving without anyone being ready. You saw Ashraf Ghani had to run away very quickly, who was the closest sort of ally of United States. What has resulted here is much less opportunities and much more challenges for South Asia from Afghanistan. And what we are seeing here is that this part of rivalries being too much in focus and United States-China rivalry perhaps influencing local rivalries far too much is now resulting in China, Pakistan, Russia drifting in one direction. You see, they are not even attending G20 meetings or climate change meetings the way other countries are joining. And on the other side, India, United States, and its other friends and allies are drifting in other direction, which is going to only create more complications, create new rivalries for South Asia. So I'm talking of China, Taliban, Pakistan on one side, or even you could add to that Turkey, Malaysia, Iran. And on the other side, you have India and European nations and United States and Canada and others. So this is only creating far more complex situation of introducing new rivalries than what we have seen before. To some extent, I will wait till the Pramod speaks about it, but even India and Nepal had a phase of China-US rivalry, creating some kind of irritants between the traditional very close friends, India and Nepal. And in that sense, China's increasing leverages in South Asia are also sometimes interpreted in that larger picture of the US-China rivalries. And in fact, Chinese scholars very often feel that it's only because of them that India is drifting away to United States, which may not be true. I tell them there are other factors. But I would also not deny that the US-China rivalry perhaps is overcasting local rivalries far too much in South Asia. And there is need for caution in that sense. need to understand that these countries are neighbors. And my last word would be to quote my former Prime Minister, Atal Bihari Vajpayee, who used to say that you can, choose your friends, but you cannot choose your neighbors. And that choice does not exist for us in South Asia. And therefore, a clear understanding of how far we need to depend on countries that are far away, countries that have their own national interests to drive, and we have seen how they behave in certain situations, do not end up pushing us or taking us on the golden path, and finally we get into a big sort of blind spot where we don't know how to deal with each other. Violence is not an option for South Asia. South Asia has to focus on development. And in that sense, I think I agree that technology transfers, economic investments are fine, welcome, but they should not result in pushing our mutual equations in South Asia, driven by the cosmopolitan great powers outside, and therefore we should not be waylaid in that direction. So I'm underlining how new rivalries are emerging because of the larger US-China rivalry at the global level in this region. I'm also underlining how local rivalries are being recrafted, and I'm not sure if we are in complete control of how these are being recrafted. So that is what I wish to underline, and with a word of caution is where I want to stop here. And I look forward to listening to my other colleagues, and also in case there are any questions or comments, and I'll try to respond to them. With that, back to Dr. Pramod Jaiswal.
Thank you, Professor Singh. Next, Professor Swaran Singh.
Thank you, Pramod. Let me anecdotally begin with Asanga's reference to civilization. The South Asian subcontinent, we have seen history of 5,000 years was celebrated as a civilization. And once the largest Mongol empire expanded, they found this subcontinent, and then came, people from Fargana Valley, from, Persia, from other places. And in 500 years, we people in South Asia understood to be careful of these foreign invaders. And we started following a strategy of assimilation. So you had a great Mughal empire in this part of the subcontinent. Then came Industrial Revolution, and prior to that, the European fleets who used oceans to approach South Asia. By that time, South Asians had understood how to deal with foreigners, and said, we have to be very cautious with you people. The Europeans said, we are not invaders, we are traders. It took us another 250 years to understand they were no less invaders than the earlier invaders. China is the new kid on the block. I'm happy that some of you, particularly Pramod, underlined the fact that India very often is not able to match up the attraction that turnkey projects that China brings to the board. Agreed. But then China gives people what it is good at giving, not necessarily what people need on the ground. Second, all of you, I'm happy to see, have already underlined the kind of opaqueness, accountability, interest rates, the commercial feasibility or unviability commercially. We ended colonial heritage in this part of the world by Hong Kong returning after 99 years of lease to China. China today has leased Hambantota for 99 years, Gwadar for 43 years. So I think there is a growing understanding of money not being the only relationship that nations share between them, and how in South Asia, we countries share relationships which are geological, geographical, historical, cultural, people to people, linguistic, ethnic, you name it, religious. It's a very different kind of intertwining that we all in South Asia share. And China walks in with interesting commercial projects and strategic perspectives of their own, which is a lower. Chinese, like I often say, each nation has a character. China is a regime-driven state. It's not people-driven state. Chinese regime engages local regimes, and local regimes are happy to see their plank on the project, irrespective of the terms, And that leader goes down the history saying, I set up this airport or I set up the port, which is not even functioning, as Asanka says. So that law, which is initial law of turnkey projects coming, is beginning to be understood by people on the ground. So you can see repeatedly the criticism that the Chinese ambassadors in Kathmandu faces now by people, by elite, by intellectuals, by university students, teachers in China, the way she was masquerading in conducting local politics. So the new world warrior diplomacy, the new terms of engagement, even Pakistan, the greatest friend, sweeter than honey, stronger than Himalayas, deeper than oceans relationship. Only country where Chinese want a 15,000 force troops to be raised to protect Chinese investments and Chinese engineers, and you nevertheless have people being kidnapped and killed in dozens. Out of $62 billion promised, about $8 billion so far from 2015 to 2020 on the ground. Same period, India has received China's $4 billion of investments. No troops raised to save Chinese citizens in India. So sometimes we miss the point that, apparently it looks China-India rivalry, but there is also enormous engagement that is happening at the same time. So sometimes countries have leaders who are fascinated with these sudden, offers being made, and they see electoral advantages in sort of pursuing that engagement with China. But that is going to be definitely short term, and we are realizing one after another countries showcasing how people on the ground begin to protest, how local elites begin to disengage with Chinese. No harm in engaging with China, no harm. There is enormous deep pockets, as Salma says, China has, and they can invest. But on what terms are they investing? How long-term benefits are going to be drawn from those investments? I'm not denying the fact China is the largest source for India's imports, even today, despite all Galwan and Doklam and other tensions on the border. Are we really carefully calibrating our engagement with both China or European Union or with ASEAN or United States? Or is there a certain intoxication effect that initially some of our leaders faced? And that looked like China was beginning to hijack the situation in South Asia. I'm happy all of you have underlined how gradually we are all waking up to the fact that we have to be far more cautious, how our interests lie, as Shahab just mentioned, in interconnecting within all of us. Instead of emphasizing our, breakpoints, what are the things that combine us and make us far more dependent on each other? Instead of, trading between India and Pakistan through Dubai, why not trade directly between us? Much cheaper, much easier, much fresh commodities reach on each other's side. But because, last point I'm making, because these larger external rivalries influence our local rivalries far too much, is why we are often waylaid and we end up doing things that are not in our long-term interests. And that is where I think in this recalibration that is occurring now because of external and internal factors, I underline that there are greater challenges than opportunities, but I'm not denying the fact that there are no opportunities. So in that sense, there is a little window where things can be sorted out. And I think to some extent we are seeing that happening, whether it is India-Nepal relationship or India-Bangladesh relationship or India-Sri Lanka relationship. Things are beginning to also showcase that some initiatives are also being directly impactful on the ground and showcasing that good things can happen within the South Asian subcontinent and people can connect with each other. But it doesn't mean that the external bigger global structural factors have stopped being influential. And that is where I think we all need to be really underlining the fact that we need to wake up. And I agree with all of you, Afghanistan is a great case study for all of us to understand how we have to be really taking care of this region by ourselves, engaging others, but on our own terms. Thank you. Pramod, back to you.
Thank you, sir.